This is Robert Kennedy Jr. He's nephew to former President John F. Kennedy. He's an environmental lawyer, and he's also a former presidential candidate that's working to make America healthy again.
The biggest myth is that if you're obese or overweight, it's your fault. Look at the photographs of beaches or state fairs from the 1950s. Something has changed, and it isn't human nature. We haven't suddenly become lazy or gluttonous. What has changed is our food system, a food supply that's loaded with high fructose corn syrup and seed oils and hundreds of artificial additives and flavors and processed carbohydrates that don't exist in nature.
Short answer is he's right. However, it's a specific substance called octadec-9 that's in the seed oils. That's the main culprit driving the obesity the most. From being nice and lean and healthy in the 1930s to what we've become today, sick, tired, and overweight. Welcome, new viewers, returning guests, thank you for tuning in. Today in our episode, we are going to be going deeper into the cause of American obesity by looking at how fat actually accumulates in our bodies. In our previous episode, we discussed what caused American obesity. We showed that the main cause is not just a matter of excess calories or eating junk food or lack of exercise or willpower, but rather specific substances in our food supply that when we eat them, actually trigger our bodies to produce more body fat with the same amount of calories. We covered how all this began around the 1940s, so we looked at people from the 1930s just to see what they looked like before all this happened. And to our astonishment, we discovered that there were no obese people. There were very few overweight people, and everybody was healthy. Like, literally everybody was healthy. In today's episode, we're just going to go deeper into the cause and really take a look at how the fat actually accumulates in our bodies. Okay, let's jump right in. I keep bringing us back to this video for a few reasons, but mainly to remind us that this is what modern humans are supposed to look like. This is what we're supposed to look like. This is our base form. I say our base form because it's been almost 100 years since then, and we have gyms, we got supplements, a healthcare system, none of which they had. So by now, we should all be looking like Greek gods, you know? Now, even though I did all this research showing what the main cause is, I keep hearing in my head, it's our fault. We eat too much. We don't exercise. There's toxins in the food. And as bad as all this is, it's not the main cause. Octadec-9 appears to be the main culprit. This substance signals our bodies to turn up the fat-making machinery, just like carbs and sugar signal our bodies to produce insulin. Octadec-9, when we consume it, turns up the volume of the fat-making machinery with the same calories. In our last episode, I was explaining how this involves really heavy molecular biology and biochemistry, and I introduced you to a new word, lipogenesis, the creation of body fat. Today, in this episode, I'd like to introduce SHREP-P1. SHREP-P1 is the master regulator of fat production in humans and animals. Lipogenesis is the creation of body fat. SHREP-P1 is the fat-making machinery. Think of SHREP-P1 as like a volume switch controlling the production of body fat. Just like adjusting the volume switch on your stereo, SHREP-P1 determines how much fat our bodies will produce with the same amount of calories. And similar to how people develop insulin resistance and their bodies keep producing more and more insulin and ultimately become diabetic, Octadec-9 signals our bodies, SHREP-P1, to turn up the volume and produce more and more body fat. Period. That's its job. Okay, now let that sink in. Just like we have biological machinery that makes proteins, muscle, bone, blood, etc., we also have biological machinery that makes the body fat. Let's just take a look at a simple diagram and some studies describing how all this works. Okay, we eat octadec-9. The octadec-9 signals the SHRB-P1 to turn up the lipogenesis. Now, it just so happens that one of the types of fatty acids our body produces is octadec-9. So we consume octadec-9, our bodies produce more octadec-9, we have more octadec-9 floating around in our blood, and it stays elevated for a while. So you can see how this is like a negative feedback loop. Now, the next thing you know, like you're eating another meal and it's got more of this octadec-9 in it, and it keeps getting elevated, it comes down, elevated, it comes down, and it just stays elevated. Now, having these elevated levels of octadec-9 in our bodies and the lipogenesis, turned way up, the octadec-9 never really returns down to baseline. So we always got elevated levels of octadec-9 even in the morning before we start eating. So this is the main cause. This is the reason behind the American obesity epidemic. And it's also the reason why it's not our fault. It's not your fault. You never even had a chance. You didn't even know this stuff was in the food supply. And it only takes a small amount. Now, let's just use an example. Let's think of younger people. Younger people are mostly lighter, leaner, and they can seemingly eat whatever they want for a while. And then years go by, and all of a sudden, their pants or their clothes start getting tighter. The scale starts going up. And even though their lifestyles and their eating pretty much remains the same, this is how the fat accumulates. It sneaks up on us. Let's look at some studies in more detail and see how this is actually happening. To confirm that octadec-9 creates this negative feedback loop and is the problem, in 2007, researchers took C. elegans worms and modified them and removed this specific molecule. They could no longer make any body fat. Any body fat. They could eat as much as they wanted and still not produce any body fat. But when they fed the worms octadec-9, they could resume making body fat. This study with the C. elegans worms shows that it's not just about eating excess calories. The study confirmed the control mechanism and that the trigger is octadec-9. Octadec-9 is required to produce body fat in humans and other animals. Let me say this again. Octadec-9 is required to produce body fat in humans and other animals. So now, just to show that this is possible in humans, that a human can eat as much as they want and not produce any body fat, here's an example of a boy with a disease. Although it's caused by a different scenario, it's clear that the human body doesn't produce body fat solely due to calories. So another study was done just to confirm all this, but this time it was done on rats. They fed the rats varying amounts of octadec-9. There was different types of fats, and each one had more and more and more octadec-9 on it to see what would happen. And sure enough, the rats that had the fat with the most octadec-9 produced the most body fat. So now you can see it's also dose dependent. And just to drive this home, another study was performed. This time was done on pigs. It was basically the same study. The only difference was they had one fat had high amounts of the octadec-9, and the other had very, very low amounts of octadec-9. And sure enough, the pigs that consumed the fat with the highest amount of octadec-9 produced the most body fat. However, there was an alarming discovery made with this study. It was the amount of octadec-9 that it took to cause lipogenesis to increase. It was very, very small. It was only 5% of their calories. It only took 5% of their calories to increase the lipogenesis. So again, it's just real problematic here. Okay, so let's put this all together. Octadec-9 is required to produce body fat in humans and other animals. When consumed, octadec-9 signals SHRB-P1 to turn up the lipogenesis so we make more and more body fat. Unfortunately, octadec-9 is in a lot of foods, and our bodies will also make octadec-9 when we consume it. And unfortunately, it only takes a very small amount of calories to start upregulating the lipogenesis. Only 5% of the calories you consume. This is how we went from our base form in the 1930s, nice and lean and healthy, to what we became today, sick, tired, and overweight. Now, you keep hearing me say how this is reversible, right? Now just like you took a healthy population, you added Octadec 9, and everybody became sick and overweight and obese, we should be able to reverse this by simply removing the Octadec 9 and let it below 5% of your calories, and just let your body burn off the Octadec 9 so there's hardly any in it. The Shred P1 will start down-regulating the lipogenesis, and we should just return to our base form. At the Body Lab, as great as we are at helping coach people to train their bodies to become efficient at burning fat, it's just much easier if we just made less fat to begin with. And this is why we're educating you on Shred P1 and how the body makes body fat to begin with. Again, if you want to get started, the very first thing you need to do is to get a little simple finger prick blood test, mail it out, and get the results back so you can see just how much of this Octadec 9 you have in your body. And then secondly, just again, go through your cupboards and your diet and just remove all the foods with the Octadec 9 in it, and just give your body some time, because it can take like 4 to 5 months, sometimes even longer, to reduce the amount of Octadec 9 that built up. So we'll leave a little link below. We'll leave a link below so you can get the home test kits if you're interested. And if you ever want some tips, or if you want to be professionally coached and guided through all this, just reach out to us. That's what we do. We help train your body to burn more fat, and now we're going to be teaching you how to make less fat to begin with. So again, thank you for tuning in. We hope you found this information very valuable and you appreciate it, and that we're here to help. So again, God bless. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.